Welcome to Salute Your Sports Week 19. Kamenechev, Drew Brackett, Tom Castleman here to talk sports, all the best sports, and sort of breaking news when it comes to the recording of our show. It's Thursday today. We had earlier today in the morning the big news coming down. Carson Wentz traded to the Indianapolis Colts. The Eagles' star quarterback who hasn't played like a star the past 2 years. Guys, what do we think of the trade? I believe, let me pull this up here. I've got it. He went to the Colts for a third-round pick and a potential second-round pick or first-round pick if Wentz plays 75% of snaps. It's a first-round pick or 70% in the playoffs. First impressions of the deal. We'll break down more specifics with Contract Castleman in a little bit.
Well, I mean, it certainly seems like the right price as far as most people would say. We were hearing stuff pretty early on, and it was mostly probably coming from Eagles camp, that they were looking for a first-round pick and that they even had offers on the table for 2 first-round picks for Carson Wentz. That's turned out to be nothing but a bunch of hot air. I mean, who would pay 2 first-round draft picks for the right to pay a player who's been mediocre for the past season? I think that, there's a lot of teams that probably could have paid that price, and it seems, like I said, like the right one. A third-rounder this year isn't too heavy of a price to pay, and if everything works out, I'm sure the Indianapolis Colts will be more than happy to give up a first round next year if they're in the playoffs and succeeding with Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the right price for Wentz. But now the question is, so you have a good offensive line. At least the Colts offensive line was good this past season. But who is he going to throw to? I know T.Y. Hilton is around. I think he's an unrestricted free agent. So who knows where he's going to end up. Obviously his future with the Colts, we don't know what's going to happen. But you have Jonathan Taylor as well. So that's good, but yeah, they may need a couple receivers for him to throw to, and I'll be curious. I don't know who their backup is, but I'll be curious how many snaps he plays and just see if we see improvement from his time in Philly, in the last couple of years, rather than whenever, he was good in Philly, of course.
Yeah, interesting to note that the backup, I believe, is Jacoby Brissett. But if I read it correctly, it's still 75% of snaps. Even if they don't make the playoffs, he would still take that in. I think for me, it's very interesting because you guys are right. It seems like the price is about right. I know the Eagles wanted 2 first-round picks. I don't think anyone was going to give them that, so I think they realized that it wasn't going to happen. I do think that it's kind of interesting what the Colts are doing. Certainly Carson Wentz is much younger than Phillip Rivers, but to me it felt like last year they brought in Phillip Rivers when he was past his prime, and now it feels like they're bringing in Carson Wentz when he's past his prime. So I'm not 100% sure that it is the right fit. It's very hard to say because obviously we saw this guy play like an MVP candidate just 3-4 years ago, but the last 2 years he's been terrible. I mean, quite frankly, last year he was 34th in the NFL in completion percentage. He was first in interceptions despite not playing much of the last 4 games. He was first in sacks despite not playing the last 4 games. His accuracy, there were all sorts of stats. We know he didn't have good receivers. We know he didn't have a good line, but he would also struggle to hit wide open receivers. So it's hard to say. I think a breath of fresh air is good for Carson Wentz. I think whether we're talking about the Colts and Eagles, this is a good move for Carson Wentz. He goes to what was a playoff team last year. Drew brought up T.Y. Hilton. Whether he sticks around or not should be interesting. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure about this move. The price seems about right, but they're going to have to pay. The Colts will assume the balance of Wentz's $128 million extension, including the $10 million guaranteed roster bonus, due on March 19th. Meanwhile, the Eagles will take a $33.8 million dead cap hit the largest dead cap hit any team has ever taken for any player. So to me, I'm not sure who the winner or loser is between the Colts and Eagles, but I think the winner is Carson Wentz. He's the one who gets the right situation. Tom, what does that $33.8 million dead cap hit mean, Mr. Contract Castleman? And it does seem like the Colts are going to pay quite a bit of money for Carson Wentz, too, as well.
So the dead cap hit is just a penalty that's assessed to a team where even though they're not paying the player's salary for the season, he still counts against the cap. It's the NFL salary cap is a weird place to be. It seems like teams can always make room, but it's one of those things where if you kind of kick the can down the road long enough, or if you try to get rid of somebody too soon into a contract, there's a pretty stiff penalty in place for doing that. So we have the NFL salary cap. I think the floor has been determined to be at least $180 million this year. It's come quite a bit down because of COVID and no fans in the stands. So basically what the Eagles are saying is, we are willing to take a massive hit to our ability to spend money to upgrade our team in order to get this guy out of here. I think that you're absolutely right when you say Carson Wentz is the real winner in this situation, because he's going from a team that on low-key kind of seems a little bit dysfunctional, a little bit more so than we perhaps thought for a team that won the Super Bowl just 3-4 seasons ago. Head coach Doug Peterson is now gone. There's friction between him and Carson Wentz. Usually when there's friction between player and coach, a team chooses one to get rid of. Here the Eagles got rid of both, and at a fairly prohibitive cost. And like you said, he's going not only to a playoff team, a winning team, he's going to a team where the head coach is Frank Reich, who was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles in 2017, which is Wentz's MVP caliber season, until he suffered an injury late in the year that knocked him out of the playoffs and led to the ascent of Nick Foles to the folk hero legend that he is in Pennsylvania. But yeah, definitely seems like a great situation for him, and pretty steep cost on both sides. I have fairly high hopes of it working out, although I'll say I have been inordinately predisposed to liking the Indianapolis Colts for the past year or so.
Yeah, Common, where did you want to see him? Did you want to see him in Chicago?
Certainly not. You kind of stole the point that I was about. I definitely did not want to see him in Chicago. I felt like if there was a team that was going to pay too much of a price for Carson Wentz, it was going to be the Bears. Certainly it seems like it was a false rumor, but I saw a rumor floating around that the Bears were willing to give him 2 first-round picks, and certainly that wasn't the case, because if it was, the Eagles would have traded him there. But I do think that if you followed this closely, which I sort of did, I guess, it was rumored that it was between the Colts and the Bears. So this is one of those deals where it was almost in Chicago, and personally, again, it's hard to say because there's certainly talent there. He may make me eat my words, and certainly a change of scenery does help. But I think we've seen him regress so much that I almost feel like he's over the hill. I really do. So I'm not necessarily super fired up if I'm the Colts or the Eagles in this scenario. I kind of have a sort of a breath of fresh air, a free release. Because we know the Bears have a horrible track record with quarterbacks. So had they gone with Carson Wentz, I would have felt that he would have definitely been a failure in Chicago. Certainly in Indianapolis, he has a chance of succeeding. He's going into the right situation. But, man, again, it's a guessing game, but I tend to think the other way than Tom does. I think we've seen regression for 3 years now. Every year he's gotten worse. He can't get any worse than he did this year, but I have a feeling that he's not going to get significantly better. I think he's not the same type of player. When you wait 2-3 years for a guy to come back to himself, well, 2-3 years, that's like, a third of a guy's career. Like, we've been waiting long enough. He's had enough opportunities to prove himself, and this could be sort of a last chance type of opportunity. And I'll tell you what, if you're the Colts, if he doesn't play well, he might get benched because, like I said, that second-round pick becomes a first-round pick if he plays 75% of snaps. It would be interesting to see if the Colts are sitting at about 500. Wentz is not terrible but mediocre. They realize they're not going to make the playoffs. Do they all of a sudden bench him? Because he could kind of be in that same scenario that he was this past year.
Possibly, but I don't really see that happening. I mean, he's going to a team that has great infrastructure. I mean, something that's we've kind of been seeing in Philadelphia over the past couple of seasons is ever since they won the Super Bowl, you know, their overall talent's been declining a little bit, and they've just been hit hard by injuries seemingly every single year. And, you know, past season was no different. Carson Wentz certainly didn't do himself any favors, but if you look at that offensive line that he was playing behind, even the great Patrick Mahomes has difficulties when playing behind a shoddy offensive line. That's a strength in Indianapolis, and the Colts have money to spend. They have $70 million roughly projected for the cap for 2021, so they can still go out and make plenty of improvements on their roster and give him some successful winning. This is a good team that's on the rise, and really, outside of Deshaun Watson, who is the definitive best quarterback on the market, I think Carson Wentz, you know, gives them the best shot at some upside. I mean, he's only 28, he's not 38. I think he can definitely regain some form here.
Well,
I don't think his reign is over either.
I think the reign is closed. But I could be wrong. Speaking of quarterbacks, though, I do think so far a quarterback that I think is better than Carson Wentz. To me, the big blockbuster deal was the Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford trade. Let me pull up the specifics here. 2 future first-round picks and a third-round pick to the Lions for Matthew Stafford is what the Rams sent. At first, when I looked at that, I felt that was a little bit of a steep price. But then I kind of thought about it, and in my head, you look at the Rams, who traded for Stafford. They've got the best defense in the NFL. They've certainly got a creative play caller and a head coach. And the receivers are decent. I mean, there is some room for improvement, but certainly I actually think Jared Goff was one of the main things holding them back from, quite frankly, being a Super Bowl champion, because we saw them get to the Super Bowl 2 years ago with Jared Goff, and Matthew Stafford himself goes from a dysfunctional organization to a really good one. Guys, we didn't really get to talk about this trade because of the Super Bowl and all sorts of things. When it comes to this quarterback sort of carousel that we're seeing, which one of those teams, you know, the Eagles with Wentz, the Colts now with Wentz, and then we have the Lions and we have the Rams, who kind of put themselves in the best position to win and got the best quarterback situation? Because, as you guys know, I say draft picks are no guarantee. I think we've become so enamored with draft picks, and I'll give you a stat. Since 2016, what was the stat? From 2009 to 2016, every first-round pick quarterback is no longer with his team 4 years later. 22 first-round picks. None of those quarterbacks are still with the team they were with last. So that in itself tells you that first-round picks are no guarantees. So I look at Matthew Stafford. I think he's better than Goff. I think the Rams are the big winner so far in free agency.
Yeah, well, I think they're a big winner because they also managed to get rid of Jared Goff's contract, which was a bit of an eyebrow raiser. They gave it to him after that Super Bowl season, but then we saw him over the past 2 years regress quite a bit. And he was part of that deal. I think that's why it was multiple first-rounders for Matt Stafford. It wasn't just, hey, we're trading for your quarterback. We're also trading for you to take our guy, so we don't have that massive cap hit on our books anymore. I mean, the LA Rams are going all in at this point. They don't have a first-round draft pick until the end of Fernando Tatis's deal or something like that. We'll cover that in baseball a little bit later. They're going all in, and quite frankly, this kind of fits into something that I'm a big proponent of, which is it's not all about the quarterback. You know, Matthew Stafford falls into that tier of very good. You know, can sometimes win because of him, but for the most part, he's more of a win-with quarterback who was just forced to do too much in Detroit. Now that he's going to be going to Los Angeles, where he has, steady weapons where he has a really, really good head coach in Sean McVay. And then, of course, kind of like you mentioned, that awesome defense. I mean, this is a team that looks like they are, have their sights set on Super Bowl in 2022. So they're the big winners for me. And I think, we can talk a little bit about, when we get to locks of the week later, if, how we want to do futures or something like that. But I wouldn't mind throwing down $1 or $2 on seeing the two teams that upgraded their quarterback situation in LA and Indianapolis, perhaps maybe meeting up as a long shot for the Super Bowl.
Wow. Carson Wentz in the Super Bowl, he would probably get injured in the first playoff game, and his backup would lead him to the Super Bowl. Because we know that's happened before.
I mean, I'm bullish on both those teams, so.
Yeah, you love man.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be bullish on the Rams. I agree, but at the same time, Matthew Stafford, he's only been on the Lions, right? So he's going to have to adjust to a completely different system. Now, it's a much better system. It's an upgrade, but he's still going to have to adjust. And I still, in the division, I don't know if it's tougher than the division he was in because he has to play Aaron Rodgers and the Vikings and I guess the Bears every 2 times a year.
He's got to play the Seahawks, who are always a playoff team, the 49ers, who are coming off, injuries this last year. 2 years ago, they were in the Super Bowl, and we have the upstart Cardinals with Kyler Murray. I mean, they sank down the stretch, but I think that might be the best division in football.
I will note that only one of those teams in that division played in the second week of the playoffs, and it was the team that got Matthew Stafford. So I think they'll be fine.
I think so, too. No,
yeah, they will. So, I mean, I think you do have to buy stock in the Rams. It might be a little late because their stock certainly is going up with Matthew Stafford. It's going to be a fun team to watch, and I like that defense this season. And, yeah, Jared Goff always let me down, it seemed like, on Sundays. But, yeah, we'll see what Stafford can do with the Rams.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note that, I mean, you look at Matthew Stafford, this guy's like top 5 all-time in passing yards per game in the NFL. I mean, you look up the career numbers and just the sheer amount of passing yards this guy has put up. And, yes, part of it is the Lions are a passing offense. The Lions get behind in leads. You have to throw the ball. But, I mean, this guy does it. And he's kind of, if you take a look at the way he plays, he's kind of like a mini Mahomes, pre-Mahomes. He has the weird arm angles. He has the cannon of an arm. Maybe just a little bit, certainly not a turnover machine, but we've seen him get some interceptions here and there because he's had to get interceptions. He's had to make the plays because he's had, a terrible running game and a terrible defense all his career in Detroit. All of a sudden, he's going to be given the keys to a team where he doesn't have to make all the plays. He doesn't have to be Superman in order for them to win, and I think that's going to be a big boost to him, and I can see him being like a very good quarterback with the Rams. I think it's a win for the Rams. I think the Rams are winning in that scenario. I think it's also a win for Matthew Stafford. I think certainly Stafford and Carson Wentz picked up the biggest wins in this scenario. Jared Goff, on the other hand, he just hasn't shown any progress. I think he's not a bad quarterback, but the Rams are looking at, like, who can we win a Super Bowl with? And they decided Goff wasn't going to be the one for them, so they moved on. So good move for them in that scenario. Guys, what is interesting about all this is we had Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, number 1 and number 2 pick. Goff was actually first, Wentz second in the 2016 NFL Draft. Crazy to see both of them get traded in the same span of like 30 days. Who do we think has been the most disappointing quarterback of those two? Because they both certainly showed early promise and kind of plateaued downwards after that. And also, who do we think might be the best quarterback going forward for their careers?
I would say the more meteoric rise and fall has been Carson Wentz. Jared Goff, even though he put up great numbers on the way to the Super Bowl, wasn't really considered an MVP candidate, whereas up until he tore his Achilles, I believe it was, or maybe it was his ACL, Carson Wentz was going to be MVP in 2017. And then he's fallen to being, literally benched kind of sort of twice, once for Jalen Hurts, and then Doug Peterson made the move to Sudfeld in the last game of the season, controversial as it was. I think Wentz has risen higher and fallen farther, but I also think that he's best equipped to bounce back more so than Goff is. So I'll take Wentz in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll see who bounces back. I mean, it's probably going to be the guy who's going to work harder, or pick that offensive line is better. Obviously, Goff is probably going to have to throw more in Detroit, so he could put up some numbers next season. So maybe a good fantasy quarterback for those fantasy players out there.
Ooh, maybe someone Drew Brackett may pick in our fantasy league next year. A quick breakdown of their numbers. They're actually fairly similar if you look at what they've done since they entered the league. Goff, 107 touchdown passes, 55 interceptions. Wentz, 113 passes, 50 interceptions. But then Wentz, 247 yards a game. Goff, 263, 91.5 passer rating for Goff, 89.2 for Wentz, I believe it was. And Wentz has less yards because he missed more games due to injuries. 35-32 QB record, 42-27 for Goff. He played on a better team, but their numbers: completion percentage 63.4 for Goff, 62.7 for Wentz. So a lot of those numbers look pretty similar for both of them. I think Castleman put it best. I think Wentz certainly was the higher rise, and I think Wentz has a little bit more of that escapability. He can run around and make plays, but lately he hasn't made them. So as far as who I think is going to be better, I'm not high on either one of them being ever a Pro Bowl quarterback again. I don't think either one of them is going to win a Super Bowl or make a deep playoff run. I think we're looking at two guys that were mediocre quarterbacks. I think Goff is in a better, or not rather Goff, Wentz is in a better team. So I think Wentz would be probably the answer, because if you go to Detroit, it's a dumpster fire over there. So Goff is in big trouble. I think he's in big trouble. And I think if he had played very well against the Packers, they advanced in that game. Does this happen? Maybe, maybe not. So I think, and that injury late in the season certainly hurt Goff as well. If I'm Jared Goff and I'm going from beautiful and sunny LA, playing for a great team and a great coach, then I got to move to Detroit all of a sudden and play for the Lions. Whew. Talk about adjustments. That's adjustment for you right there. And it's a new coaching staff too. That's why Stafford left Detroit. He didn't really want to be a part of a rebuild. They're kind of completely tearing it down there, going with a new GM, a new coach. First impression of the new coach, the press conference, certainly not a very good first impression. I'll tell you that. That guy seemed a little out of it. So, I think Jared Goff is in trouble. I feel for him. But that's what happens in the NFL. As I said, from 2009 to 2016, 0 out of 22 quarterbacks drafted in the first round are still with their current team. And that's the climate that we live in. With sports, whether fair or not, if you're a quarterback or you're a coach, you don't deliver, hasta luego, we're moving on. Except for the Bears, who seem content to possibly give Trubisky, as I call him, chance after chance after chance. I do think since 2016, the reason they make that stat, certainly we've had some hits with Mahomes, Josh Allen, and other guys like that. And so that stat, of course, it's changed the last few years, but that's what it goes as far as evaluating players. It's very hit or miss, but I would say more often than not it's miss. So that's why when people get obsessed with that first-round pick, I'd rather take the guarantee, because I know Matthew Stafford is a good quarterback, and that's why I like Matthew Stafford. I'm not so sure about the risks of Goff and Wentz and all these draft picks. So Matthew Stafford, to me, is the winner of free agency, and the Rams are the winners of free agency.
Well, the free agency hasn't even started yet. These are trades that I think the league year starts in like March or something like that. So they jumped out to an early head start, but certainly have a lot still ahead of them. Speaking of jumping out to great head starts, we haven't talked a whole lot of NBA, and I know listening to various sports outlets, not a whole lot of people have talked about the Utah Jazz
Yeah.
being on an amazing tear. I think they lost like their first like they lost 3 or 4 games within like the first 10, and then I think they've had the stretch where they've lost like once in the past couple of months. They've been absolutely on a tear, and bonus for us, plenty of Mizzou ties to go around.
Yeah, no kidding. The Jazz 24-5, the best record in the NBA. They're coached by a former Mizzou Tiger basketball coach. They also have Jordan Clarkson there on the team. He's arguably the sixth man of the year for the NBA. So I think that's an interesting team. Guys, do we think the Jazz are the biggest threat to the Lakers? Because interesting to talk about is they were up 3-1 on the Nuggets last year in the playoffs in the first round until they blew that 3-1 lead. What do we think about the Jazz? Are they the team, the best team, the team with the best chance to dethrone the Lakers?
I mean, they're hot right now. I'm not sure if they can keep it up the entire season. You know, obviously Donovan Mitchell and Clarkson, Conley, Bogdanovich, Gobert, they're all playing really well right now. And, you know, they're cover machines as well. In addition to just winning, they're also covering the spread in most of these games. I can't remember the number, but it was like 7 or 8 straight, which is incredible. But can they keep it up? We'll see what happens after the All-Star break, if it's a fluke or not. As you mentioned, last year they were up 3-1 on the Nuggets. So this team is a good team, but they can, once they meet the Lakers, can they keep up with them? We'll see.
You talk about covering the spread. Last week I may have placed a parlay on the Jazz, and they did definitely cover the spread for me. I believe it was against the Clippers. So thank you, Utah. Quinn Snyder, by the way, the former Mizzou basketball coach that coaches them, certainly a long time ago. I don't know. It's hard to say because they have a lot of good players. But to me, and as much as, you know, we're former Mizzou Tigers, we love seeing the Mizzou guys play well in the NBA, and Jordan Clarkson and Michael Porter Jr. are really the only two guys still out in the league. And, I mean, guys, to me it comes down to, are they a fluke or not? It's probably somewhere in the middle. But we've seen these teams have great regular seasons before. We had the Atlanta Hawks a few years back, the Milwaukee Bucks most recently. So regular season success doesn't necessarily equate to postseason success. I think the best comparison we have to the Jazz is probably the Miami Heat of last year. That was really the only team I can think of in recent memory that hasn't made the NBA Finals without a mega star, because, you know, Jimmy Butler kind of played like a mega star, and he's a very good player, but I still think he's kind of a second-tier NBA star, much the way that Donovan Mitchell is, and that's what kind of scares me for them. I mean, they play great defense, they have great ball movement, they have a lot of very good players, but they don't have that star power. Donovan Mitchell is averaging 24 points and 5 assists a game, shooting 43%, 39% from three. Yes, he played great in the playoffs last year when they lost in the first round, but can he consistently do that? Because we're talking about them being the second best team in the NBA. Are they a top 5 or 6 team? I think so, certainly. But the question is, are they the biggest threat to the Lakers? And I don't think so. I mean, quite frankly, as much as we love Jordan Clarkson, he's their second leading scorer. 18 points a game. I mean, Jordan Clarkson a few years ago, granted he's improved, but a few years ago, he couldn't even do much for the Cavaliers. He was like an afterthought on one of those LeBron James Cavalier teams. So the fact that you've got Jordan Clarkson as your second leading scorer really scares me. And Donovan Mitchell is kind of a small guard. I mean, like if he goes up against a big-time lockdown defender, he certainly didn't have that last year when he played Jamal Murray. Neither of those guys play any defense, so they're like, we're just going to go to town against each other. And I think we saw inflated numbers for both of them. But you put up little Donovan Mitchell against some of these lockdown guys. If the Jazz are, in fact, in the second round or Western Conference Finals, I think they're going to have a hard time. And simply, to me, the biggest threat is the Nets. And what scares me about the Nets is they've had so many injuries, so many COVID, so much drama that we haven't seen Harden, Durant, and Irving play together all that much. But to me, it's like, look at Donovan Mitchell, like, not to be disrespectful, but I think Kyrie Irving is better than him. I think certainly James Harden is, and Kevin Durant is without question better. So you look at a team out in the East like the Nets, who have 3 players better than your best player in Utah. I think they're in trouble. I really do. I think their run has been impressive. I think Utah's a very passionate basketball city, so I wish them all the best. But I don't think they're the best contender for the Lakers. I think their best case scenario is making the Western Conference Finals, but I'm not convinced that they'll even get there, to be honest.
Yeah, well, they're currently sitting at second in the NBA in defensive efficiency and fourth in offensive efficiency. So they're certainly operating at a high level on both sides of the ball. I agree with you. Playoff basketball is very different from regular season basketball, where you're playing the same team and best of 7, and you're going to see a lot more. You're going to see a lot more shorter rotations. Looking at the Utah Jazz, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, doing my best Mike Francesca impression. 6 players that score double-digit points on average. That's going to change a little bit. I look at their roster, and I don't actually really know who their top perimeter defensive player is. Obviously, Rudy Gobert is a perennial Defensive of the Year player for sure. But if you put Mike Conley on, say, like LeBron James, Conley's a point guard. Who's their best wing defender, I guess, is the way to put it. So, looking at the West, I think that the Clippers are probably the best team to match up with the Lakers, just because they're really the only team that has like that wing for wing star power, where you can have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George guarding LeBron James, perhaps even going a little bit smaller on Anthony Davis or having Serge Ibaka guard him. I think Clippers are the biggest threat coming out of the West to the Lakers. And then, Colin, you mentioned, Nets, they're my pick to win the title. Bucks would also be a good challenge, Philadelphia. But I'm not going to short the Jazz so much. It wouldn't surprise me to see them, go to the Western Conference Finals and maybe even win it. They could be more reminiscent of that last Spurs team that won a title, where Tim Duncan, way past his prime, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, they're all past their primes. They had Kawhi Leonard on the ascent, and he was the one who was kind of going up against LeBron James. But besides that, that's kind of reminiscent of this Jazz team in terms of they rely on everybody. They rely on the system to kind of go out there and win games. So definitely an exciting brand of basketball to watch. I really like watching it. It's a shame that it's so difficult to watch them, given that they play on the West Coast. But yeah, I think that they're definitely a fun team, and I'd say they're for real. I don't need an all-star break to see if they're going to come out just as hot afterwards. I mean, it might be impossible to be as hot as they are now, but I think they're definitely for real.
Drew needs the all-star break. Tom does not. A real quick note on that Spurs team. I think that's a very interesting comparison. I saw like an awesome video on Twitter that showed they're passing the ball. That was incredible. It looked just like the Spurs. But I think the Spurs had that winning culture. The Jazz don't necessarily have that same winning culture. In fact, I don't think the Jazz have ever won an NBA championship. They couldn't win it with Stockton and Malone. And certainly we haven't seen it as much in recent years. But the Jazz have always been a winning team. They're not, they're that team that's always good, pretty good, but never great. And they don't necessarily have that culture in place. They could build it, certainly, but I'm not going to trust them. I think, I don't know. It's hard to say because I'll be honest with you, I don't really trust the Clippers because similarly, they also don't have that winning culture. They've also never made the finals or won an NBA finals. And you look at the Nuggets, they're struggling this year, but they were the team that came up last year. I think we've got a lot of these teams that don't have the sort of winning culture. So, I mean, I still definitely like the Lakers versus the field in this scenario.
And by winning culture, you mean LeBron.
Yeah, LeBron James, man.
That's all you mean.
You look up
and Anthony Davis, two of the top 4 players in the league.
Every
the
year,
Lakers.
Finals, with the exception of that one year he got hurt, you look up, it's LeBron James in the NBA Finals every year.
And
That's what it comes down to in the NBA. You need that superstar power in the playoffs usually, and I just don't think the Jazz have enough of it. A team that's sort of reminiscent and similar to the Jazz in many ways. I look at the East as the Milwaukee Bucks. They're a team who's had a lot of success in the regular season, but it hasn't, worked in the postseason. And speaking of, East expectations, you look at the best teams in the East last year. We had the Milwaukee Bucks, the Miami Heat, the Toronto Raptors, and the Boston Celtics. And all 4 of those teams are around 500 this season. All 4 of them are certainly underachieving. And we have the Sixers, who are at the top of the East right now. We have the Nets, who are second with all that star power. Of those other 4 teams, because I think we kind of agree, we're on the same page. We think the Nets are the team to beat in the East. But if not the Nets, some of those other high-powered teams that we mentioned, the Bucks, the Heat, the Raptors, and the Celtics that have struggled, which one of them is most likely to make a deep run, and which one is most likely to fail, maybe lose early or not make the playoffs?
I mean, you got to think that the Bucks will continue to make the East. Well, they'll probably make the Eastern Conference Finals this season. After last season, it was a disappointment in Orlando. So you have to think that the Bucks are going to turn it on and figure it out. They just kind of, again, the regular season, I just don't put much stock towards it in the NBA. They're all just kind of middling. There's, load management is a huge thing, as we know. So just it's really tough to figure out who's really good and who's, the best, essentially. So I wait till, again, after the All-Star break. That's when you start locking down on the NBA and, seeing who's going to show up and really want to make a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the Bucks are sitting, top 3 right now?
Yeah, they're like second.
Something like that. So, I mean, I think...
They're third. They're 16-12. So, I mean,
third.
this team that had 12, was it maybe 14 or 15 losses each of the last 2 seasons. So they're well under what they were doing the last 2 seasons. For sure. No, I think that the Bucks are certainly a good pick to go far. I mean, if you look at just in the East and in the West, outside of a couple of teams, at the very top and at the very bottom, we have so many teams in the middle because we've had, with all the COVID protocols, we've had game cancellations, we've had weird schedules and everything. So I'm not going to put as much into, record in the regular season to know if they're a legit team or not. I think Bucks are a good pick to go deep. I'll be a little bit different and say the Boston Celtics. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum are a fantastic combination. You talk about, a lot of perimeter play, a lot of guys that can play both sides of the ball. They're both very good scoring, and I know Brown's the better defender, but Tatum's no slouch either. I think both those guys are really, really capable on the perimeter. You have Kemba Walker as a really solid third guy, and he's willing to take the big shot. I mean, we've seen him all the way back when he was at UConn and was a seven overtime game against Syracuse. He's able to and willing to take the big shot, but he can also facilitate just as easily. So I think the Celtics could be poised to make a pretty a deep surprise run. The team that I am willing to short on, the team that, and I'm not often a big guy that likes to say this team's not going to succeed. I'm generally pretty positive about things, but I mean, for me, it's the Miami Heat. To be perfectly honest with you, I was surprised that they made the finals last year. I'm surprised that they won 2 games in the finals last year. I thought that as far as, looking at NBA Finals teams, they're probably one of the worst ones that we've seen in a long time. I think that for whatever reason, they were able to come together better in a bubble circumstance, with the season being stopped, was it mid-March and then resumed in July.
I think that if it had been a normal season, if this horrible pandemic had passed us by and we're living in an alternate universe, I don't think the Miami Heat make it to the finals last year. So they're a team that I thought overachieved by a lot, and I think now they're probably underachieving a little bit. They've had a bunch of injuries so far, and not all their guys have been playing all the games. But I certainly think they're closer to where they actually, should be as opposed to where they ended up last year.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question because I look at the Celtics, I look at the Bucks, I look at the Heat, I look at who else was the other team in that mix that
Raptors.
I had? The Raptors, and I mean even the Sixers. I look at all these teams. I mean they're all pretty evenly matched, and we saw that in the playoffs last year in the East. There were a lot of close games. I think the Raptors Celtics went to 7 games. I think the Heat and Celtics only went to 6 games, but a lot of close games. Same deal with Milwaukee and Miami. Even though Miami ran away with it, that was actually a closer series than it looked. To me, I think the team that's most likely to make a run is actually the Boston Celtics. And Tom, you talked about it. I mean, and a lot of it is because of Jaylen Brown. This is a guy that went from 10 points or rather 13 points, 20 points. Now he's at 25.9 points per game. Jason Tatum, 25.8. That is one of the best, if not the best, 1-2 scoring duo in the NBA. I think certainly if they're healthy and playing together, LeBron James and Anthony Davis are the best. But if you look at just from a sheer points perspective, those two guys are up there for sure in the East and among the best in the NBA. And I think Kemba Walker is the reason why they haven't taken off. Kemba Walker has been horrible this season. You know what his field goal percentage is this year?
I have a feeling you're about to tell us. It's your favorite statistic when judging basketball players.
It is, in fact, my favorite statistic because efficiency matters. His field goal percentage is about 36%. But what's mind-boggling about this is that he's 36% from 3, which is respectable, but 36% overall. So that tells me that Kemba Walker's mid-range game and his layups near the rim are horrendous. And simply put, he will improve. This is a guy who was an all-star, I think, just a couple years ago, maybe even last year. So I think he's going to become that third option that you talked about. I like Brad Stevens as their head coach in Boston. They do kind of have that winning culture there in Boston. I think Kemba Walker improves vastly from the horrible play that he's had early in the season, and that makes them kind of, a good 1-2-3 duo, and they're all perimeter players, and they can all shoot the basketball, and that's how you win in the modern-day NBA. I will say this. I would not shortchange the Miami Heat. I think certainly, I agree with you that they're probably one of the worst teams to make the finals. But at the same time, they're a very young team. You look at Tyler Hero, you look at Nunn, you look at Bam Adebayo, you look at Duncan Robinson. We don't know that these guys are going to be great players, but certainly you would think that a lot of these guys are going to improve. So I think Miami's slow start is in part due to injuries, which matters a lot with camaraderie. So I wouldn't sleep on the Heat just yet. I actually think the team that it's more of a feeling that I don't really like in this scenario is the Milwaukee Bucks. You got to prove it to me, man. And the Raptors were that team that couldn't prove it to you. They finally won because they got lucky because the Warriors got hurt in the finals. They don't have Kawhi Leonard anymore, but Fred VanVleet has come on of late to be a great guy. Fred VanVleet scoring 50-plus points in the NBA game these days. I think they've got Siakam, they got OG Anunoby, Jefferson City High School's own. They're from mid-Missouri. So they've kind of got the pieces in place. Toronto plays good team basketball. So the team that I really don't like is the Bucks. They got to prove it to me, man. Prove it to me in the playoffs. They haven't proven to me. They remind me a lot of the Atlanta Hawks. So I'm weary about the Bucks making a playoff run. I can see them crashing out in the second round of the NBA playoffs. And until they prove it to me, I'm not feeling the Bucks, man. I'm all aboard the Nets train because you look at a 7-game series. It's one thing when you look at regular season records, but can you beat a team over 7 games? And once we get to the playoffs, Durant, Harden, and Irving are all going to be playing every day. And what's been impressive about the Nets is James Harden's willingness to be a point guard. And Kyrie Irving told him, you run the point, I'll play shooting guard. And that almost has sort of fixed a lot of issues. Their defense needs work, but you look at the Nets, I like what they have over there in Brooklyn. I think I would feel great about Durant, Harden, and Irving against anyone else except for the best player in the game, LeBron James.
Drew, do you have any teams that you're dogging out of the East?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know. The Nets are the team to beat. The 76ers, I think they're in first place, but I'm not even sure they'll make the Eastern Conference Finals because Joel Embiid has to keep up his really good play, and who knows if he can. That guy, he's injury prone, so he'll probably get hurt in the next month. But the Bucks, yeah, I mean, they do have to prove it, but they have Giannis, and if they can just turn around, not turn around even, if they can just improve a little bit, then they can absolutely beat the Nets in the playoffs.
See, I don't know. I mean, the thing with Giannis that just drives me nuts, it's the same. I mean,
So who do you put on Giannis?
Kevin Durant.
That's what the Nets have to figure out. The Nets have to figure out how to play some defense.
And then he gets tired on defense. So, I mean, I guess you have Harden and Kyrie on offense to pick up the pieces.
That's the point, though. Yeah, Kevin Durant doesn't have to get tired in a series like that, whereas you have Giannis, who's kind of like, I mean, Chris Middleton's a good player, but Giannis is kind of the man there. And that's the beauty of Harden, Durant, Irving. They can each take rests at random parts in the game. Even if they're on the court, they don't have to dominate the ball as much as some of these other stars would, like a Giannis Antetokounmpo. So I don't know. The Bucks don't seem to be getting better. It's much of the same thing as we see with Jared Goff we talked about. There's just not any sort of progression. The fact it scares me that, 2 years ago, were they in the Eastern Conference Finals? 2 years ago they were, and last year they were out in the second round. So, I mean, where is the progression? And all of a sudden they're having issues this year. And I love Giannis. He's a lovable guy, but, he is like their one superstar, all due respect to Chris Middleton. And I think in the playoffs, these teams, they pack in the paint, and he can't hit a jump shot, and it becomes very hard for him to win playoff series. I mean, that was the ascension of LeBron James. We saw him when he was, in his second or third year against the Spurs. They packed in the paint. LeBron James couldn't do anything. LeBron James worked on his outside game. He's certainly not Stephen Curry, but LeBron is a respectable outside shooter. LeBron James can knock down a three-pointer. LeBron James can hit a mid-range jumper. And LeBron has that incredible passing and vision to set up his teammates. Giannis is more of, I'm going to go to the bucket and score over you and use my athleticism, but he doesn't necessarily have a very refined offensive game. He's not per se a great dribbler. He's not really a post player, but he's not really a perimeter player. He does a lot of his damage in transition. And I think he could be very good if he's paired with a second true superstar, but I don't think Chris Middleton is that, and I think there's a lot of weight to carry on his shoulders, whereas you look at some of these other teams like Boston have multiple scoring options. Miami play great ball. I mean, they talk about winning culture. That's what they have in Miami there, with Spoelstra, Pat Riley, and all that. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but I'm not feeling good about the Milwaukee Bucks personally. College basketball, though, guys, not a lot to feel good about if you're a blue blood. You look at Kansas struggling this season. You look at Duke, Michigan State. these teams may not even make the tournament. You look at UCLA, Kentucky. Kentucky certainly isn't going to be in the tournament. Last week we talked about some of these college basketball teams that have made surprising runs. Who can really continue that stretch? Well, of these blue blood teams that have struggled, which one of these teams do you guys think is most equipped to possibly make the Sweet 16, Elite Eight type run? I think it'd be a stretch to say any of them are true title contenders, but who can make a run into that potential second weekend of the March Madness tournament?
I mean, as much as it pains me to say it, I do think the Kansas Jayhawks are my pick out of that grouping to have a decent run. If you look at Joe Lunardi's bracketology, where he kind of forecasts how the brackets are going to shake out, currently they're on the 6th line. So that means that they have, some decent wiggle room in terms of going up against an 11 seed and then facing a 3 seed, certainly better than facing a 1 or a 2. And if you look at their record this season, have 7 losses. 5 of those losses have been to teams that were ranked at the time. And then the 2 losses that they had to unranked teams were in conference and on the road, where they lost at Oklahoma and at Oklahoma State. Both road games that they lost, and they've had some decent wins. They beat Creighton in the not preseason but non-conference season.
About 1 point.
But they still won. I mean, it still counts. They got Texas Tech and West Virginia when those teams were ranked in the top 15 respectively. So I think, of those teams, Kansas probably stands the best chance of going deep. But in part that's because, we're not even sure that all these teams are necessarily even going to make it into the tournament.
Yeah. Drew,
I'd say
Mr. KU over there.
Yeah, either Kansas or UCLA. UCLA 14-5 on the season, dealing with a lot of injuries. So if they get some guys healthy late, that would really help them. They could be a sleeper team because they had a really good start to the season, and just an injury bug kind of hit them, and they lost back-to-back games just a couple of games ago. So obviously the Jayhawks are in prime position out of the teams you've been named to make a run, but also watch out for the Bruins.
Yeah, UNC also another team I didn't mention in that group that I meant to. I would definitely say the team to look out for, wait for it, I agree with Drew Brackett, the UCLA Bruins. This is a team that could shock a lot of people in March Madness. And guys know how much I love analytics, or we're not necessarily analytics, but statistics. UCLA, Drew, you put it 14-5, 10-3 in conference play. They have the best record of any of these teams. 6 guys averaging 9 points or more. They've got balance. But what I like about UCLA when I looked at it closer, and I have seen them in person, or not in person, but on TV a couple times, and they happen to play well when I watched at least. But what I like about them is they're 8-1 in games decided by 6 points or less. So that tells me that they win a lot of close games. They've done well in the clutch, 3 overtime games. They've won 2 of them. I mentioned that 8-1 record in the 6-point games. They also had a triple OT win that was by 9 points. So to me, I think Kentucky, Michigan State, and Duke are so far back that they may not make the tournament. UNC and Kansas, they're just off. They have the most talent, but I don't really like either of these teams. I watched UNC against Virginia, and I was very unimpressed by what UNC brought to the table. UCLA has some seniors. They have a very good mix because they have a lot of good sophomores, but also a lot of good seniors. So that's one of those things. You got some of those major blue blood teams. They've got all these freshmen who haven't figured it out in a COVID season. Well, UCLA has a little bit more experience. So I like UCLA. I look at them as a potential Sweet 16 team. They could shock some people unless they get, very poor seeding. A lot of it does come down to the seeding. If they get like a 6 seed, Tom mentioned, that could help them, like Kansas, as opposed to if they get like a 5 seed or a 7 seed, they might be in trouble. But I like UCLA. I'm looking forward to March Madness. I have a feeling that we're going to have some Cinderella teams, and I'm going to be spending the next few weeks digging up some research, digging up them holes so I can find the Cinderella team that I picked correctly in Davidson in 2008. Davidson, led by Stephen Curry, making the Elite Eight, predicted by me because I watched Davidson against UNC in the opening game of the season. Very impressed with Davidson. They made the tournament run. So, guys, we got to find the next Davidson in the next few weeks because there's a lot of potential for upsets this year. I know we say that every year, but I think it's even more true this year.
Absolutely, yeah. The line between mid-majors and non-power teams and the power teams is slimmer than ever with all the one-and-dones that we see of guys going through. We actually see a lot of smaller programs with more veteran talent making a run. I think, I don't know, I might keep this in my back pocket for now, but I think I've got one that might be worth investing as far as the Cinderella team goes, and putting my emotion and hopes behind them. But that's something we can maybe talk about a little bit closer to tournament.
Loyola, that's his pick. He likes Loyola, guys.
I do like going local, yeah.
Well, that's why you watch, conference tournament week, championship week with all the smaller conferences. They're all on ESPN or ESPN2, at least the finals are. So, got to tune in for that. I haven't looked at the schedules for this season, but historically they're always on ESPN, ESPN2, and, you can watch the Bellarmine Knights win the conference tournament for the ASUN.
We'll see what happens, guys. We talked about how we haven't talked that much about basketball. Well, we've hardly talked about baseball the last few months. I don't even remember the last time we talked baseball on this show. Well, we had pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training, and we had that happened yesterday or today, Wednesday, Thursday, and just a lot of news going on with baseball. Tom Castleman brought this up. I believe it's a 14-year, $340 million deal that Fernando Tatis Jr. got. I think it's the third most lucrative deal in MLB history. We had, the Padres have been busy. They got Yu Darvish and Blake Snell earlier. We had the Cardinals getting Nolan Arenado for prospects. A great third baseman, Gold Glover, average hitter, power hitter, home run champ in the NL. And the Dodgers keeping busy getting Trevor Bauer, the Cy Young winner. They've now got 3 Cy Young winners in their rotation alone. So, guys, what do we think about MLB free agency? And who do we think has done the best moves in terms of teams, players? What really stands out to you guys?
Well, the free agency and off-season really came down to the one market inefficiency that nobody really likes talking about a whole lot. It's who's willing to spend money and who is not. One one move that you didn't mention, I don't think, was Francisco Lindor getting traded from Cleveland to the Mets. Mets new ownership. Steve Cohen is a billionaire who doesn't mind spending a little bit of money, and then we've seen Trevor Bauer going to the Los Angeles Dodgers, who win the title and then still seek to get better. The San Diego Padres, trading for pretty much anybody who's willing to just give up pitching. But I think, kind of like the one move that stands out the most is just like the biggest head scratcher was the Rockies trading Nolan Arenado the way that they did. I know it's a smaller market team. Money's a little bit tighter, although I hold the opinion that there's no such thing as a small market team in baseball. They're all raking in money hand over fist. But the curious thing about Nolan Arenado is he's a third baseman in his prime, and what the Rockies did was they traded him to the Cardinals. The best prospect they received was somewhere around 7th to 9th best prospect, depending on who you read. And then the Rockies also gave the Cardinals $50 million to take Nolan Arenado. Like, this isn't getting rid of some player who's on the back end of his contract, like a Robinson Cano. This is a guy who's in his prime, who's an MVP candidate. That was, a very shrewd move for the Cardinals, to be sure, to pick him up in a division that isn't really looking all that strong. They can get a couple marginal wins there, but certainly a curious move, but very exciting for St. Louis fans. I know that much.
Oh yeah, it's a very head-scratching move, as you mentioned, by the Rockies. I don't know what they're getting out of it, really. Cardinals loaded up, but besides that move, I think Trevor Bauer going to the Dodgers just kind of got even better. I mean, I think their win total this season that Vegas is projecting is historic. I mean, they're expected to be very, very good, and the Rockies, obviously, on the complete end of the other end of the spectrum, they're expected to get 60 wins this season. So, I think the winner, obviously, the Cardinals and then the Dodgers.
Yeah, I think it's a huge win for the Cardinals in the sense that they've got a pretty good rotation. The Cardinals have very good pitching. They've got very good defense. Really what they're missing is bats. They need more hitters. They need more power hitters. They got Paul Goldschmidt a couple years ago. That helped. Now they get Nolan Arenado. They're taking all these talented guys out of the NL West. I think that is helping for the Cardinals. If I had to pick the winners, I mean, it was a very bad move because you guys know this. I'm not huge on prospects and draft picks. Like I like seeing proven talent, and these guys that the Cardinals gave up had very little MLB experience. A few of them had played very little in the majors, and a lot of them weren't, as Tom mentioned, literally top-notch talent. You weren't giving away your top prospects. So that was clearly the Rockies were the loser of the free agency. But in terms of the winner, I mean, I actually think as good of a move as it is for the Cardinals, it's between the Dodgers and the Padres because the Padres got what they needed with Darvish and Snell. They've got the hitting with Machado and Tatis Jr. They've got 14 years of Tatis Jr. now. I don't know if that money was too much, but as Tom said, they've got a lot of money, so why not spend it? I don't love a 14-year deal. You never know who's going to get hurt, but I believe he's 22 years old, so you're essentially locking him up for his entire prime, so that could be a good move. I think the Dodgers, though, it's crazy to think, got better more than anyone else because they got a Cy Young winner in Trevor Bauer. They've already got a Cy Young winner in Clayton Kershaw. They got Walker Buehler, who pitched great last season. They've got Julio Urias, had a 1.17 ERA in the playoffs. And wait for it, David Price opted out last season. This is a former Cy Young winner in David Price. This guy they're essentially getting two Cy Young winners. One they don't even have to sign. They're getting him back just because of COVID, and they've actually got a really good mix because you look at Kershaw, you look at Price, you look at Urias, they're left-handed pitchers. Then you got Buehler and Trevor Bauer, they're right-handed pitchers. So that kind of throws teams off a little bit. And they also kept Justin Turner. Justin Turner, they just signed him, their star third baseman. So they basically have everybody back, plus two pitchers on a team that already led the MLB in earned run average last year. Drew talks about a historic win total for the Dodgers. I mean, if things go well and how they should on paper, we might be talking about one of the all-time greatest teams in baseball history. That's simply how much talent the Dodgers have.
It's like they got like a video game going on over there where it's just like nobody cares about money. We're just going to focus on getting the best talent that we have available, whether we like really need it or not.
Right.
It's the MLB. You can never have too much starting pitching, but they also have Dustin May, who's arguably he was their top prospect, and he was great as a starter for much of the playoffs last year. So they just have depth upon depth upon depth. I mean, we could be seeing. I think it's the Seattle Mariners hold the regular season record for 116 wins. To be determined if we have a full 162 game season, but wouldn't surprise me to see the Dodgers challenging that record.
Yeah, what's the over-under on the wins, Drew? You know the over-under, don't you?
Yeah. I think it was like 104.5.
Wow. Yeah, I would hammer the over, as Drew Brackett would say. He actually hammers the under usually.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 104.5. Wow. Ooh.
Yeah.
Huh?
I mean, I don't know if part of that is with the whole COVID, if they play less games, like say they play 150 games, like, yeah, that could go under. But if we go 162 games, I feel pretty safe in saying that the Dodgers can win 105 games. One other real quick move I thought was really neat, I liked at least, the Cubs bringing back Jake Arrieta. Don't know that he should have ever left, so good to see him back in Chicago. They tweeted out a photo of him throwing in spring training this morning. So good to have Jake Arrieta back in Chicago for the Cubs.
For sure. See if you can capture a little bit of that magic. Speaking of catching a little bit of magic, we're moving over to the Australian Open, something that I'm not terribly strong in discussing, but I know that Serena Williams, you know, the longtime American hero and a favorite tennis player of mine, really struggled, was not able to capture some of that age-old magic in her loss in straight sets to Naomi Osaka. Haven't caught much of the Australian Open, we'll say.
You
but
don't
that was
stay up at 2 a.m. watching tennis like me? What is wrong with you, man?
No, that's usually when I am asleep. I go more of the Drew Brackett route of I'm tucked away in bed at that point in time.
What's your bedtime? Drew's is like 9.
Mine shifts. I'm anywhere between like midnight and 1:30, something like that.
Wow, that's late.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm more like 2 o'clock. So, but I may be up a little late for some Australian Open tennis, certainly.
Yeah, I'm not that invested.
So so actually, what made that loss by Serena Williams interesting is, you know, obviously there are different people, different brands, but in many ways, Naomi Osaka is the new Serena Williams. She has that sort of, she's African American, Japanese. She's got like a mix there, but she's also like huge on endorsements. I think Serena Williams and Naomi Osaka are the two female players who make the most money, and Osaka is kind of taking Serena's kind of the face of tennis. It's kind of like the shift. You know, obviously Serena will retire here within the next few years, so that was sort of like a matchup of, you know, the top player we've seen for the last 15 years, the top figure. Osaka now may be on her way to being the top player if she already isn't. What makes women's tennis amazing is that you don't have a top player. You've got, you know, Serena Williams, you've got Osaka, you've got Ashley Barty, you've got Simona Halep. I mean, it's like take your pick. Every other week, the rankings changed. On the men's side, you know, we have Djokovic, Nadal, Federer. We've seen them dominate the sport for the last 15 years. Serena did that, but the last 3 years or so, obviously she's past her prime, and it's really anyone's game. In terms of who I think is going to win the Open, the Australian Open, I think it is going to be Naomi Osaka. I think the hometown Australian, Ashley Barty went out, Serena Williams went out, Simona Halep went out. She's got a fairly easy road to that title. I like Osaka to win on the women's side. Guys, what do you think?
No love for Jennifer Brady, you know, from the U.S. She was the 22nd seed in this tournament in the final with Naomi Osaka. But yeah, you got to take Osaka here, and she's just such a likable person. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw her post-match interview, but the commentator asked her, "Hey, you know, what were you doing to stop Serena serves?" And you know, Naomi's just like, I was just guessing and got lucky kind of deal, you know, like she's just so likable, and I don't know, just her personality. Her personality's a lot different than Serena's. Serena, you know, very aggressive on the court, and Naomi not as aggressive, and you know, she's just a light, kind of a soft talker, I guess. But yeah, I'll take Osaka.
Men's side,
I'll take Osaka as well. I don't have a whole lot of analysis to add.
Ah!
Ahmed, no tennis analysis. You don't have the breakdown of the backhand, play at the net, forehand, serve percentage, second serve. You don't have the numbers for us. What's the DVOA of tennis, Tom Castleman?
That is an excellent question, and I'll get back to you probably never.
Yeah, I mean, Osaka's first serve percentage against Serena Williams, her serve was going just incredible. I mean, that first serve, she was getting in. She had multiple aces against Serena, and she was just guessing Serena's serve basically every time. And so Serena had a tough time breaking her. I think it was 6-3, 6-4, so she really didn't.
Yeah, absolutely. The men's side, we've got Drew and I's picks both alive. Drew going with the surprise pick in the Australian Open, and his pick is still alive, Tom Castleman. Daniil Medvedev in the semifinals, Novak Djokovic in the other semifinal. He's playing the guy that made the crazy tournament run. So it's probably going to go down between those two guys, although we had Tsitsipas out of Greece come back from 2 sets down to beat Nadal in 5 sets. So that Medvedev-Tsitsipas semi should be very interesting. I still haven't made up my mind who's going to win that one. I think they're like the 4th and 5th ranked players in the world. So that'll be a very evenly matched one. But to me, it's got to be Djokovic. Federer wasn't in Australia. You had Dominic Thiem, the number 3 ranked player now. He went out, and Rafael Nadal went out in surprising fashion. Only the second time his entire career in a major that he blows a 2-set lead. I think Tsitsipas and Medvedev are going to have a tight competitive match. They're going to tire each other out, and they're going to have to go up against Novak Djokovic, and good luck with that one. He's number 1 in the world right now for a reason. He's going to be too tough to beat. I know he's had a minor injury that he's dealt with, but it hasn't seemed to affect him too much.
Drew, why do you like Medvedev?
Well, yeah. So you mentioned the easy road for Djokovic. I mean, the guy got hurt earlier, and Zverev gave him 4 sets. He lost 6-7, 6-2, 6-4, 7-6. So, I mean, I know that he'll probably roll in the semifinal, Djokovic. But he already did. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's played more sets or more games, but I mean, Djokovic isn't young either. So, I don't know. I guess, yeah, it's tough to go against Joker, though. Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
I'll take Medvedev.
Throwing darts.
Well, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like going against Djokovic. I mean, he's just such a good player and so fun to watch. But dethrowing
Medvedev's too good on the Australian Open court. I believe he was in the final against Nadal a few years ago. So, of course, though, the Australian Open court is probably Djokovic's best surface. So, if the
it is.
Those are the 2 places that both of those guys play very well on. In fact, you know what? We need to get together and do a Common NCHEF Drew bracket tennis match again, because we had quite a few epic battles in college, and I think we might have played once post-college, and I think Drew had completely lost the semblance of any game, if I remember. But,
yes. We had plenty of our Rockbridge matches.
Yeah, Rockbridge High School. We played tennis.
Or maybe wherever we played. I don't know.
Yeah, it was by Rockbridge High School.
Oh, okay.
Well, it seems like Drew and you'll be at odds. I've got Tsitsipas going all the way. We're
wow!
Cinderella story coming back from a couple
the 5 seed.
Nadal. Yep. Cinderella story, Tsitsipas.
Yeah, the Greek man doing it for the Mediterranean countries like Bulgaria. Of course, we had our guy, Grigor Dimitrov. Bulgarian beat Dominic Thiem, had the big upset win, and then he chokes against the guy who was the challenger, and it was just bad. It was bad. So I was hoping that he would make a run. But yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. Speaking of tennis, we got our locks of the week, and I went for a tennis lock last week. I went for a mortgage bet.
And the mortgage bet wasn't much of a bet at all.
I'll tell you this, though. Interesting story about my locks of the week last week, and you guys are going to get mad with what I'm going to do this week. But I was going to go 3 NBA last week, but one of them was kind of like a bad start time, so I'm like, I'm going to mix it up. So I would have gone 3-0. Instead, I had the loss for tennis. I lost the soccer one with Everton, and then I drew with Sevilla and Huesca, the 1-0 win. So I'm going to go all NBA this week. But last week, Drew Brackett 1-2, Tom Castleman 1-2. Not a great week for the show, but I'm confident we're all going to bounce back this week. Because I had a tie, it made our records interesting. Now Drew has the 2-game lead, so we don't have to worry about the 1.5 and tie. It just looks very, very nice on my record book. And we had a historic bet last week, Tom Castleman. Do you know what it was?
I do not.
Drew Brackett lost an English Premier League over-under. He hit one of them. Oh, wow. But he didn't even know. He lost the second one. He had it in the Wolves Southampton game. He had under 2 goals that ended 2-1. So he did hit his other over-under easily. But so we actually had Drew Brackett losing an English Premier League bet, which was something. Let's put it that way. That
historic.
Was historic. So Tom Castleman went for the NBA player props. It did not work out so well with Draymond Green and Tobias Harris. Draymond Green needed 6.5 rebounds. He had like 6 rebounds at halftime or early in the second half or something, because I remember just randomly checking it, and went on to get 0 rebounds the rest of the game. So that one didn't work out well. Tobias Harris did not make a 3-pointer. That did not hit too well. So guys, what do we have? What do we have this week?
All right. Well, just for fun, I ran these past Jenna, and without knowing my picks, she faded me on every single one of them. So we'll see how much better my better half is. So even without Kevin Durant, the Lakers-Nets game is a big one tonight, tipping off at 9 o'clock Central. The Nets are near the bottom of the league in defensive efficiency while being right at the top with offense. So give me the over at 230. That's just 115 points per team. Both those teams have been scoring a lot lately, so I'm pretty confident with the over on that one. The Miami Heat, they are on their 3rd game in 4 nights on a long West Coast trip, and coming off of an overtime loss to the Golden State Warriors last night. I think we're going to see a lot of missed shots, so take the over for Bam Adebayo, 9.5 rebounds, take the over for him. And then going back to the Nets, go ahead and grab some action with Joe Harris covering 13.5 points at -103 with Durant out for the Nets and Davis not patrolling the middle for the Lakers. I see a lot of potential for drive and kicks, so it should be fairly easy for Joe Harris to reach 14 or more points.
So let me get this. So you're going with what Jenna said or what you said?
Oh, no, with what I said. No, I'm going with what I said. Jenna does not think there's going to be any offense in the NBA tonight. She's under on everything.
You're going offense.
I'm going offense. I'm going overs.
I'm going NBA also in the game that's about to tip off. Has not tipped off yet, so I can get this one in. I'm going to go for it, guys. I got the Raptors plus 6.5 at the Bucks. They just played recently. Toronto won by 11 in their most recent matchup. I don't know who's going to win this game, but I have a feeling that Fred VanVleet is going to just go bananas from three-point land again, and I like the Raptors. I don't know if they're going to win, but I think they cover 6.5. The big game tonight, I'm going with that one. I'll be tuning in, Nets-Lakers. It's going to be a great game. Lakers minus 2.5. Interesting game because Kevin Durant is out for the Nets. Anthony Davis out for the Lakers. It's going to be LeBron James against Kyrie Irving is going to be the big storyline. Kyrie Irving made some interesting remarks in the offseason saying he finally is playing with a guy who can make the last shot with Durant, kind of hating on LeBron James. LeBron James is going to teach Kyrie Irving a lesson or two tonight. Expect either a triple-double or a 40-point game for LeBron. He's going to go nuts. Lakers cover 2.5 over the Nets. And then finally, Tom, you talked about the Miami Heat. Three games in 4 days. You talked about the Miami Heat just playing overtime. And I don't care. I think the Miami Heat are going to beat the Kings. It's listed as a pick'em game. So I don't even need points. I'm going to give you Miami Heat to win the game straight up. I think this team has not played as well as they should. Jimmy Butler's back, and I think they get back on track tonight and get me a 3-0 week.
Wow. A lot of NBA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go back to the soccer because I've been hitting. We'll go EPL on Friday, the Wolves and Leeds United, under 2.5 goals in that contest. Saturday, Bundesliga, Freiburg and Union Berlin, over 2.5 goals in that game. And then Saturday, La Liga, Atletico Madrid and Levante, maybe? Who knows?
Levante.
Yes, Levante. Under 2.5 goals in that game.
So you're probably on the right track with that soccer one. They just tied 1-1 in midweek. They played each other this week. I would like to say that I very strongly disagree with your EPL under this week. And I know I shouldn't do that because you're probably going to hit because you always hit it. But Leeds United play a lot of high-scoring games. They score a lot of goals. They give up a lot of goals. Who was the other team in that game?
The Wolves.
Yeah, so Wolves do actually play a lot of low-scoring games, but I think you picked Wolves as your under the last game, and they went over. So I'm definitely feeling very good about Leeds United and Wolves going over 2.5 games. I'm going to probably have to fade you with that pick.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure you like the Bundesliga over.
I do like. The Bundesliga has, I think, more goals than a lot of these other leagues this year. Probably the most underrated league in soccer. It's very exciting stuff, Bundesliga soccer. I watch Bayern Munich play every week on ESPN+. Certainly their games tend to be very high scoring, but that's because they don't really try to play defense. They have good defensive players, but they're all about all-out attack, and they score a lot of goals. And the other teams score goals, too, because they leave themselves open in the back. So it'll be interesting to see. I believe Tom and I will know tonight how we finish. So we'll be able to easy or not sleep so easy tonight.
I like to draw it out.
Yeah, Drew likes to draw
Into
it out.
the weekend. Wake up
Into
with
the-
that Sunday morning, watch some La Liga. Or Saturday.
Well, so you probably know this, Drew, but Barcelona soccer let me down this week. Another embarrassing 4-1 loss against PSG in the Champions League, killing Mbappe scoring 3 goals. All of a sudden, Atletico Madrid really struggling in La Liga. Barcelona only like 9 points behind them and possibly looking to get back in the title race for the league. So I'll be cheering on Levante. And if it goes under, it's more likely that Levante keeps it close. So let's go for your under. I like that one. I'll tell you that much.
Sure.
Tom, what do you think about the soccer over-unders? Any opinion?
I have no thoughts whatsoever.
I love it. That's the analysis from Tom Castleman on soccer. All right. Well, locks and statements, or rather statements and salutes of the week. What do we have, guys?
Well, mine's going to
Salute
be...
to Tim Tebow.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to quickly do a salute to Tim Tebow, who retired from professional baseball. So that'll open up a roster spot for somebody. But LeBron James, Kevin Durant are the NBA All-Star captains. That was just announced a couple minutes ago. And I know the NBA players are skeptical about playing the All-Star game, and I get their concern, but as a fan, I love the NBA All-Star game. I always have, and now that they have the Elam ending, I think last year was awesome, and so I'm looking forward to seeing it again this year. I know it's kind of controversial, but looking forward to the NBA All-Star game because I've just always been a fan of it for the last 20 years, probably.
Real quick, Drew, I know I've heard about this before. It's been a little while. What exactly is the Elam ending for fans of our show who don't know what that is?
Yeah, so you obviously just play a regular game, with quarters, and then with I don't know, 5 minutes left in the game, they turn off the clock, and then they add, like, I can't remember, 8 points to the winning, or they have a target score. So if it's 80 to 78, it's first to 88 wins, because you just add 8 to the winner's score, or whoever's winning. And that would be the target score. So instead of a clock, you have a score that you need to get to.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's kind of hard to explain if you weren't following, but I do like it because the league has kind of done a good job of making the All-Star game a little more exciting in the last couple of years with the captains, that type of ending. There's been a little bit more competition and a little bit more effort in the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's an All-Star game. Obviously, a lot of it is about flashy plays and dunks, but the NBA has done what it can to make it more exciting, more of a spectacle, and I certainly think they've done just that. So, I mean, I don't know. I know Tom thinks it's a pointless game. A lot of people think it's pointless. A lot of people think it's dangerous with COVID. Personally, I like it. For me, I think the NBA does the best All-Star game weekend with the dunk contest, the three-point shootout, the skills challenge, the All-Star game. It's something I look forward to every year, so definitely looking forward to it. I agree with Drew. My statement of the week, and we'll have more on this in the coming weeks, but what are the Houston Texans doing? Like, what are you doing? They just released J.J. Watt. They didn't try to trade him. It's a move that made absolutely no sense. This is a team that let DeAndre Hopkins go for next to nothing the previous year. David Johnson, second and fourth round picks. They also gave up a fourth round pick. So basically Hopkins for Johnson and a second round pick made no sense. This year, potentially they could let go of Deshaun Watson or trade him. But J.J. Watt, okay, yes, I know he's past his prime. Yes, I know he's had injuries. Yes, I know he's older. So maybe you can't get a first-round pick from him anymore. He did have 16 sacks just 2 years ago. So if he gets healthy, maybe he has something left in the tank. But even if he doesn't, you can't just let a guy go for nothing. He's a big name. There's a lot of interest in him. He tweeted himself, NFL free agency is wild. So clearly a lot of teams are going after him. I just don't understand what the Houston Texans organization is doing. Literally, in this case, with Hopkins, they let him go for next to nothing. This time they let J.J. Watt go for nothing. I understand them moving on from him. I get it. I mean, they can move on from him, but the fact that they're not going to get anything in return just made zero sense for me.
Yeah, well, I think that was kind of like a little bit of an ambassadorial move where, they wanted to give him the freedom to go wherever he wanted to type of thing, because I think he also asked, I think it was more mutual that he wanted to leave, and they said, okay, we'll release you on good terms as opposed to trying to trade, because, I mean, for his contract, they probably figured out they weren't going to be getting much more than like a late-round pick or something like that. So
better than nothing. Tom Brady, Antonio Brown, these are late-round picks.
For sure, yeah, but it's also that, just your opening question of what's going on in Houston. It's a really pertinent question because if you follow how the Texans organization has kind of gone over the past 12 months or so, it's been a little bit disturbing, to say the least, how some person, Jack Easterby, has been able to consolidate power despite having virtually no football background. He's the leading football voice in that organization. So I don't envy Texans fans in the very slightest is that they have Deshaun Watson, but as soon as he's gone, I don't envy Houston Texans fans at all. Yeah,
a lot of drama out of Houston. I mean, we didn't even talk about this move. I forgot in baseball. I mean, George Springer leaving Houston in baseball. Mm-hmm. We had James Harden leaving in basketball. We had Hopkins, J.J. Watt, possibly Watson to follow. I mean, they had Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul recently leave the team in basketball. Like, we had all this star power in Houston, and all of a sudden, like, what's going on? Houston has, their star power is next to nothing these days across all sports, assuming that Watson, leaves. I don't know what's going to happen with him. But, yeah, there's a lot of question marks about what's going on there. And we had just a couple years ago, I mean, you look at the Texans and the Rockets, Well, and the Astros still are in baseball, certainly one of the main contenders, but at least on the basketball and football side, we had two of the best teams in the league, and both teams, and all of a sudden, it doesn't look like either team is going to make the playoffs anytime soon.
Yeah, it's a far fall to say the least. For my statement of the week, it's going to be pretty short and sweet. It centers around Serena Williams getting ousted in the women's semifinals on Wednesday, losing in straight sets to Naomi Osaka. Margaret Court has the all-time record for women's tennis majors at 24. Williams is right behind her at 23. She is 39 years old, so it is fair to question if she will get there, but my statement is that I think she's definitely going to get to 24, and the bigger the statement, the bigger the reward. I think she can get to 25. It's not going to be easy to do, and we certainly have questions about her future of if she's even going to continue playing tennis. She was asked that question in the presser after her match, and simply that's not the right time to ask somebody. It's a very emotional experience coming so close to winning another final, another major, and falling short of even making it to the finals. But yeah, put me down for 25 majors for Serena Williams.
Wow.
I'm looking this up right now, but Serena, really the story with her the last few years is she's made quite a few semifinals and she's made quite a few finals, but she hasn't sort of been able to get over the hump late in those tournaments, much like Roger Federer. Roger Federer is the same. You know, he's missed this last year with injury, but Federer has been making the semifinals with ease. But when he gets there, he hasn't won. Serena Williams last won a major in 2017, the Australian Open. So I mean, it's been 4 years. So certainly, I would like her to get that record. I think she is chasing Margaret Court. I don't know how long she'll play. I think she'll definitely play the rest of this year. I think she, wants to complete the calendar year, play at the Wimbledon, play at the U.S. Open. I think if she gets to 24, she's probably going to get to 25. It's one of those things where you got to sort of get over the hump is what's been her issue. It's just a matter of whether she can get to 24. I'd like to think that she will. I'm going to agree with you, Tom. I think she's playing good tennis. She just needs to come up more clutch, which she's done most of her career, just hasn't done it last few years. But I'll agree with you. I'll take 25 for Serena.
It's bold. It's going to be difficult because we're going to see her kind of face the same travails that Roger Federer, same age as Serena Williams. He is stuck, quote unquote, on 20 majors, and then we also kind of see this with Tiger Woods, where he's chasing Jack Nicklaus and trying to get some more accolades there as well. So we're kind of seeing, we're used to seeing whether it's Michael Jordan. Or I'm trying to think somebody on the baseball side, maybe Barry Bonds, as somebody chasing an all-time great individual. And we so often see them overcome and set that new standard. Now we're starting to see, some of these prize athletes that have been massive successes, massive fan draws. We're seeing the twilight of their careers, and can they summon up that old power within them, one last time type of thing. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah. Drew, you like Serena over 24.5 majors?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch, but these younger players, kind of have her number in the last few times, as you mentioned, so we'll see.
The reason why I like Serena, because as good as some of those younger players are, there really isn't a dominant face of women's tennis. The reason why Federer is struggling so much is that he has to go up against the Djokovic or Nadal. I mean, we had the Wimbledon final a couple of years ago against Novak. Federer played his heart out, actually won more total points, but Nadal won the clutch points. Or not Nadal, Djokovic won the clutch points, winning a 5-set match. I think Djokovic is really the guy that's been standing in Federer's way the last few years. I don't necessarily think that there's a clear number one tennis player on the women's side, so I think Serena could eventually pull through. I think look for her to play very well in Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, particularly this year. But I think that does it for Salute Your Sports Week 19. We'll be back next week for Week 20. We'll see how our locks of the week do. Tom and I will be able to go to bed with ease tonight knowing how we finished. bracket will have no idea because the games are 9 o'clock tip-offs, 10 o'clock for him in North Carolina. So he'll be sleeping. He'll have to get the update in the morning. Have a great one, everyone.